Good evening. This is the December 6th meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission. And Will, do you want to do roll call?
Yeah, I'll start roll call. Chair Levi,
Present?
Vice Chair Barton,
Present.
Commissioner Wheatley,
Present.
Commissioner Bean,
Oh, Bean, present, sorry.
Commissioner Greiner,
Present.
Commissioner Fairclough,
Present.
and Commissioner Bubenik.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Oh, can I gavel? Let's do it.
Absolutely.
All right. So the first order of business is approval of minutes from October 4th and October 18th, 2023 meetings. I do not see them in the folder, so,
Sorry about that.
But they were linked from the website.
yeah, the November one that's gone.
They're linked on the webpage. I didn't put them in the meeting folder though, so if folks not had a chance to look at them, and if not, we can always put it on the next meeting agenda.
I reviewed
Okay.
them from the website, if that's
I
helpful.
see, so the
Okay.
the minutes are in each section. Okay.
Yeah, but they weren't in the folder like they typically are, so I apologize for that.
That's okay. So do any commissioners have any comments on the October 4th meeting minutes? No? Okay, can we get a motion? Motion to approve?
I make a motion to approve.
Okay, second?
Asking for one or making one?
Asking for a second?
Oh, second. Sorry, I thought you were.
Sorry. All those in favor? Aye. Okay. The October 18th meeting minutes, any comments? No? Okay, do we have a motion and a second?
I make a motion to approve the October 18th meeting minutes.
All right, I'll second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Whew. All right. So next order of business. So our previous chair, Joe Archibald, he was serving as a non-voting member for the Multimodal Transportation Commission, and a lot of the goals and some of the projects even that they're looking at align with Planning and Zoning Commission, and so they actually have a list, a request for someone new to represent Planning and Zoning as a liaison for them, and we have someone that's interested, and what that would be is reporting to us each meeting with a summary and bringing up any issues that would inform the UDO changes if necessary. Any discussion? Anyone want to make a motion, nominate someone?
I nominate Commissioner Wheatley.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion passes. And do you accept?
Yes, begrudgingly.
Voluntold.
Any opposed? No? Okay. Motion passes.
Kim, you seconded that? Or no?
I did.
think Byron did. That's right.
We're moving fast, folks. Okay. So next on the items, the administrative items, so planning and zoning, there's been several goals through council, and we've also, there's been a missing middle study done recently, and some interest in possibly a by right benefits table for larger scale multifamily developments. And so I've looked at the budget and some of the goals for the department as a whole, and some of it is aligning with other commissions, advisory councils, particularly the Affordable Housing and the Neighborhood Advisory Committee. And so we felt the need to create a work group, which would be less than quorum, ideally rotating membership, because that allows for more involvement, and no agenda. So it's really kind of like a research, getting familiar with the UDO as it pertains to housing policy, and working with staff to eventually turn it into a formal subcommittee based on policy. And I would love it if anybody has any input or any questions about that. Please go ahead.
Oh, I don't have questions, but I'm excited about it. I think it's a great idea.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely appreciate your leadership on this, Chair, and I think that the goal, as I understand, is not really to duplicate a lot of the good kind of housing discussions that have been happening in the community and at various committees of council and advisory groups, but really to help lift up the land use component of housing in our community. So I'm really excited about it, eager to see what comes back to the full commission out of that work group.
So listing board, would that be 3 members?
I believe so, yeah.
Would all 3 be rotating, or would there be one permanent, one for continuity, and then 2 rotating, or how would the structure of that be?
Well,
Or do we have any ideas on that? I mean, I feel
it
like
depends
some-
on who's interested. I think as long as we have a diversity in whoever comes, I think it's initially going to be based on availability.
Okay.
And, it's always going to end up being the same people who want to be there every single time. So it's probably going to work out that way.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I want to reiterate, I really appreciate you bringing this up. I think it's a great idea. And at this point, would we be forming it? Would we be making a motion to form this work group and establish it and then have that basically flexible format where as long as we stay below quorum, all members of the commission are allowed to be involved?
Well, I wonder, do we even need to make a motion on something that's a work group?
I think you should, and I don't quite understand this rotating. I understand what you're saying, you want different members involved, but maybe it could be every 6 months you change membership,
Yeah.
because the 3, I guess I would think you'd nominate 3. And I don't know if you want to say, and if you want them to just meet and decide what they should do, and then they come back to the next meeting and say, we're gonna, at least one of us will go to this meeting and that meeting, and however, what that group does, I guess, let them have their initial meeting and bring that back to the commission, just to let you know. But I would think nominate the members or people volunteer to be on it, and I think you should stick with 3.
Okay. Who wants to be on it?
I do.
Yeah, Susan does. Susan's in.
I've done everything.
It's your chance.
I mean, I don't know if I can nominate myself. I'm willing to serve on this
Sure.
subgroup or be one of the people. I don't know.
See, everyone wants to be on it. So how about the first time we have Susan? Who else?
Commissioner Wheatley,
Oh.
Hmm?
I don't have the time commitment, so I don't
Okay.
tell us my name.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I love housing. I spend all my day working on housing and happy to support this group. Open to, being a part of it or just in the
Yeah.
context of this meeting, providing some feedback as, the working group gets established. But
Okay.
I'd actually love to see, since there is so much interest, others take those first 3 working groups.
Okay.
It doesn't have to be 3, if you just have 2, that's to start, I mean, it's up to,
Okay.
Well, Brendan, you said you've got time and interest?
I'm available, yes.
Yeah,
I'm
well,
interested.
I'd nominate you. I know you did a great work on the missing middle housing study and represented us well there. It'd be cool to see you keep that up.
Okay.
Thank you.
Chair, are you interested in serving on this work group?
I'll try, yeah, I'll do it for a little bit, see how it goes. Why not?
So, in view of that, can I do a nomination of a slate of 3 candidates for the P&Z Housing Policy Work Group? Commissioner Bean, Chair Levi, and Commissioner Fairclough. I nominate for the work group.
I'll second that.
Can we have some discussion? I mean, Commissioner Wheatley, did you not want to be on this?
I do, but I try to, let's see. There's much good work to be done in the community, and it sounds like we got three enthusiastic folks. So, and a motion in a second, so I'm not going to step in and, yeah, I think.
Okay. We'll consult you.
For sure. Okay, do we have a second?
I already seconded.
Okay, well, all in favor? Aye, okay. It worked. Yay. All right. Mr. Satvika, what you got?
Good evening, Vidila Satvika with Planning and Urban Design. I'm here to talk about the missing middle housing study. We received the final report from our consultants Opticoast a few weeks ago, and so I will give you a summary of the 155-page report. This is how it's broken up by chapter, and we'll just spend a slide or two on each chapter, so we'll kind of go through quickly. The first chapter looks at really what the purpose is. We all know that we're in a bit of a housing crisis, and so we're trying to review the policy that and the barriers that negatively impact housing supply in Asheville, and how we can better make recommendations to improve and align Asheville's regulations with the city goals. The image here shows the Housing Opportunity Index, which is showing the share of homes sold in the area that would have been affordable to people on a median wage income. And you can see that, in 2014, supposedly, if this is accurate, 70% of homes could have been purchased by middle wage earners, and today it's closer to 20 or 30%.
I've got a quick question. Do you prefer we ask questions as you go through each chapter or hold till the end? How would you prefer it?
Whichever's fine.
Okay. Inside the first chapter here, it's noted that the point is the scope of the study is to identify regulatory or policy barriers. And was that part of the initial RFP from the city of Asheville?
Yes, it was.
Okay. So the intent of this is to basically generate regulatory change. That's the intent of this.
Yes, and so we first have to understand which regulations are the problem. It helps.
Excellent. No, I just wanted to, I didn't want to be reading this as just like passive material. It's proactive material.
Yes, definitely.
Okay, cool.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yep. So chapter 2 talks a little bit about what missing middle housing is. So for those who aren't familiar, middle housing refers to house-scale buildings that are multiple units, like you see here. Well, most of these are multiple house. The townhomes are individual units with shared walls. But they're house-scale buildings with multiple units that fit into neighborhoods. And they're considered missing because we really haven't been building a lot of them for the last 70 years. So effectively, our building stock is missing this component of housing that was a part of pre-war construction. So you can see here that a lot of these structures look very similar to buildings you might see in residential neighborhoods. Some of them admittedly are bigger, like the multiplex, that can get up to 20 units. A courtyard building is sort of like a multiplex, but shaped in a pattern that has larger shared open spaces. These are housing options that aren't that prevalent in Asheville. And we'll talk some more about that. This chart here shows some more, a little bit of context. Historically, it shows the middle units produced and compared to the total share of housing. So you can see that in recent years, the share of middle housing has dropped to closer to 5%. The idea with this image is that it's from Sears Roebuck catalog, that in the past, it was easy to get plans to build your fourplex. And today, it's almost really difficult to do that.
I don't know if this is a technical question or if it's an opinion, but would you consider the fact that you could order these out of a Sears catalog cookie cutter?
Probably, yeah. I think
Okay, so
that's-
it may be clear then that some of these houses that are identified as historic and having great detail and character might have been construed as cookie cutter previously.
Right, yeah, like Brownstone, Brooklyn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that's the way I'd seen it, and I was like, I didn't know if I was looking through some strange glasses or what.
Yeah, no, these were much more prevalent earlier. In Chapter 3, there's a review of barriers and some review of what the community's concerns are. And here I'm just calling out some of the key concerns and barriers, so I'll just read them off. The first one is the concern that new construction may not benefit the community, or that increased development will undermine tree canopy, and that new units may not be affordable. Key barriers were that zoning is outdated and too restrictive, that financing can be challenging for multi-unit buildings, that the cost of land is high, and parking can be restrictive because it's too difficult to comply with. In another part of the analysis, we include a renter survey that we conducted. And these are just a couple of points that we're calling out. On the left, these are responses from a question, which was, which of the following housing types would you consider owning? Select all that apply. And maybe not surprisingly, single-family home was the highest response. But interestingly, townhouse, duplex, and triplex received almost 50% of the response. And this is interesting because we don't have a lot of these. So it's showing that there's a strong demand for at least some of the middle housing. On the right, not surprisingly, 94% of respondents say that the largest hurdle is the unaffordability of housing in Asheville.
On that survey data, has it been just the survey data released?
We do have it. I'm not sure if it's in the draft that is available online. So we're still working on the final adjustments to the document, and it will have the full data to the survey.
Excellent.
So did that come from Rent Cafe? I know that was listed as one of those sources.
From what?
Rent Cafe? Rentcafe.com
I don't know.
or something?
No, we conducted the survey on our own.
Okay. Whew,
Yeah,
okay.
we
I
did.
was like, I've never even heard of that.
No, we hired a consultant
Okay, good.
to help us, and we did our own outreach. At the end of the Chapter 3, the consultants review different zoning districts that we had them use as their analysis, and review some of the key zoning standards to identify which were larger barriers to missing middle housing. So for example, let's look at the RS8 column. There's a red check mark, a red X, which identifies that there's a barrier to 4 or more housing types, because in this case, only one housing type is permitted, single family. And so you can see they kind of go through and try to just show visually which districts have more barriers than others. And the table goes on, so this is just a snippet of what's in the analysis.
Can we slow down for that section?
Sure.
Because a lot of those tables are super hard to read. Like, I don't understand it at all, honestly. Like, it's crossing out things, and it's saying more than
Yeah,
4
so
types. What is that referring to?
So under the RS8 column, for example, density maximum, it's saying that 1 of 9 missing middle housing types is allowed. So on the far left bottom, see it says number of 9.
Okay.
So what they're trying to show is to what extent the standard is enabling missing middle housing.
Yes.
And so the larger the number, the more housing types, more housing typologies are permitted within that district. And that's all. It's not only is it trying to show you how much of a barrier, but they're trying to quantify how many different housing are permitted or excluded in a certain zoning district.
So if we're looking at walkability and transportation corridors, would it make sense to get rid of like everything below, if we're wanting all these missing middle housing types, like RM16, and then everything below that doesn't really work? Is that kind of like overgeneralizing, or is it
It's
better to kind of
yes,
look at
it's-
each one and make modifications?
Well, I think, we have, we have lots of housing units in these different zoning districts. So I think it's pointing to a suggestion, and they have specific suggestions that we make adjustments to all of our zoning districts.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's showing that RM16, for example, isn't as restrictive as other districts.
Okay.
Okay?
Real quick, were there any zoning districts that allow all types? Or RM16 allows the most?
RM16 fares the best.
Okay.
Yes. And I guess my thinking in this overview is not to get in too much detail, because we can very quickly go down a rabbit holes. We can slow down however you like, but I'm sort of just skimming the surface. So feel free to slow me down if you want to talk some more about any of these chapters.
And just to clarify, we'd spoken about this previously, that RS2 and RS4 zoning were requested by the city to not even be analyzed in this information.
Right, so which zoning districts were reviewed is the question, and we determined with our consultants together that these districts made the most sense because they tended to be closest to the urban core. The other districts had issues that made them less viable, such as a greater prevalence in steep slopes, RS2 and RS4, and further away from the core, which isn't to say that when we ultimately roll out changes, we wouldn't include those districts, but that these were the most obvious choices for us to get the biggest bang for our buck with our consultants.
So if this presentation is meant to just be an overview, how do we continue the conversation with you and other staff?
Well, we could do more of this. We could have smaller meetings with your housing subgroup.
Yeah.
We can meet
Okay.
and have a deep dive.
Sounds great.
Yeah.
Okay.
Chapter 4 looks at some financial modeling of some of these sites. And I want to start by talking about this inset where they talk about attainability, because with housing a lot we speak of affordability, but here they use the language attainable. And what they're saying is that they mean households within a group that can afford to own or rent without spending more than 30% of their income on the rent or mortgage. And they're really using the area median income as the standard for attainability here. So within these future examples, we'll be talking about attainability for 80 to 120% AMI. So an interesting thing to call out here for those who are familiar with the Bowen report, the largest gap in housing that the Bowen report points to is this income group, area, the 80 to 120% AMI. So we know that there is significant need on the lower end, and there are lots of tools that we need in our toolbox to address that too, but a very large one is 80 to 120% AMI, and that's primarily what we're looking at here. So we've heard complaints that middle housing isn't affordable, and from that perspective, it's true. Really, middle housing is also, when done right, what the consultants are trying to show, for likely more for median income families. So a couple of examples, they walk through what is allowed on certain sort of prototypical lots and what could be recommended. This is for RS8. On the left, they're showing a 50 by 150 lot with a single family home and an ADU. Under our regulations, our height limit is 40 feet, and other than that, you can build out to the side setbacks. So our zoning encourages taller buildings, bigger buildings, and typically we get 3 or more parking spaces. What the consultants are suggesting for these districts is to consider allowing a duplex as well as an ADU. So 3 units in total instead of 2, but to constrain the size of the structure to not allow it to get more height and bulk than what is typical to residential neighborhoods. So they're suggesting height limit so that it looks similar to a single-family home. So we meet some of the efficiency of the land, but keep it contextual. And that leads to greater attainability and price.
Does that height vary according to what area and what zoning? What's the height recommended?
They, I don't think they specify a height except suggesting to cap the height lower than the 40 feet. Typically, the middle housing is 1 to 2.5 stories. So maybe 3 stories if it's on a commercial corridor, but really in neighborhoods 2 to 2.5. When they run the financials for this, it shows that even the duplex is really outside of that attainability for 80 to 120 AMI, but it's better than the cost of single-family housing, which is closer to, it's off this chart. When we look at another zoning district like RM6, they're showing what is allowed. You can get 2 individual buildings. One of them wouldn't face a street, and so it is sort of, a little bit potentially jarring or not historically sort of contextual to a lot of neighborhoods, because you'd have basically 2 homes, then the inner home is facing something, not the street. Again, no real size constraints. And they're recommending in a situation like this to instead allow a 4-plex or to plan for a 4-plex, but constrain the height and allow more flexibility in the parking.
So the height constraint is really around what's perceived to be a neighborhood scale?
Right, because a lot of people fear that density means more shadows and larger structures. So I think the rationale is if you can keep your buildings looking to be the similar scale with residential neighborhoods, you minimize pushback and can get more acceptance in a shift that allows more housing. So doing the financial analysis here, the rents fall within that 80 to 120 range. So it's more attainable. And that's part of the goal. So this is a useful chart that highlights the differences in housing and attainability by profession. So on the top, we have, on the far right, a detached home. In the middle, that same size home, but cut into 2 to be a duplex, and then on the far left, a 4-plex. So really the only difference is that they're split, and so the size of each unit falls by half, and the price falls. And what they highlight here is that the detached home is the only house that within these professions, sort of the chief executive can afford. The mechanic or the nurse from Asheville aren't able to afford that. In fact, even the duplex at a reduced price in today's market with new construction would be paying more than 30% of their income on those units. And so really, what this highlights is that middle housing is really only attainable for middle income wage earners, like I was mentioning earlier, and that single family housing is really out of reach for most people on regular salaries, which wasn't necessarily the case that long ago. but is certainly the case now. Now we shift to Chapter 5, which is a displacement risk assessment. And to start out that chapter, they have some analysis looking at recent demographic data. And I include this chart just to highlight that Black community has seen the largest decrease in population. And so, we need to think about our policies and how displacement has the potential to affect vulnerable populations. When reviewing the assessment, they were looking at 3 issues. One is the vulnerability of certain populations. So our consultants looked at populations and how at risk they are to being displaced based on different factors. Another factor they reviewed was gentrification or market change. So this is about where the market is changing or has changed recently to cause parts of the city to be more expensive than other parts of the city in relation to the city as a whole. And the built environment is really about walkability. Where are there areas in the city that would support middle housing?
What I've noticed is there's a bit of a disconnect in the study as far as like location of walkable neighborhoods. For one, a lot of the ones in the city are not even connected to each other, which is kind of concerning. And then the other is a lot of the areas of displacement, the high risk, and the lower incomes. It seems like those are just too high of a risk for missing middle. Like they may not be, like it would make sense because you don't want people to leave, but it's like that might not work as far as missing middle. It just seemed like from the study, it's like, let's just put it in West Asheville and North Asheville, and like, there's no gentrification there, when historically it's already happened there. And so it's like, I don't know, and there's not quite a whole lot of like transportation, at least in North Asheville. So it's kind of like, I don't know, like it makes sense to me to put some of the missing middle housing like in areas where there is, the population's already there. So I don't know, the study was interesting in that way, like maybe not knowing the entire history of Asheville, I guess, but maybe I'm wrong, I don't know.
Yeah, there's a lot in
Because you said
lot
it
of
was like a
information there.
snapshot, like a 10-year snapshot, and it really, I don't know if it necessarily accurately portrayed like some of the history in those neighborhoods necessarily.
Right, well, it's true that a lot of the data is, even in the last 10 years, things have changed so much so that the data that we're looking at, somebody who's been here for a longer time may think, well, that's not the case, but things have already changed. So if we want to go back further, I guess the question might be, how relevant is that to policy for today?
Yeah.
But those are a lot of good questions, and you had a lot packed in there, so I'm not sure how to break that down. But I guess if you have any specific question
Well, I
within
think
that.
some in their implementation is like, I think their summaries of, where missing middle makes the most sense. I want to encourage, staff and planning and zoning to kind of not necessarily hone in on that because it's just a snapshot in time, I guess.
That's
is what I'm
fair,
saying.
right? And I think, remember, let's get through this and then talk broadly about what they're recommending. But these are recommendations for what they suggest as the most appropriate places for middle housing. So if something isn't recommended on the map, doesn't mean that it doesn't have benefits in other ways. So we can get into some of that nuance. So here are a few maps from the displacement risk assessment. This is the displacement vulnerability index that shows basically where the darker colors identify the more vulnerable locations based on populations and these factors that you see in bold here. In the gentrification index, the darker colors indicate where there is market change happening or has recently happened, or where the populations, the demographics of populations have changed most quickly recently. So the darkest blue colors have changed significantly most recently. And in the middle housing readiness or built environment map, this is really showing where the darkest blue identifies more walkable neighborhoods where there is some infrastructure or goods and services nearby, and the lighter blues identify the districts that are potentially walkable or transformable with investment. So they're close enough and merit review and investment. And basically all of the maps come together. There are more maps as well. I just didn't have them all here. They lead to the strategy map, which shows green, yellow, and red. And the green shows the lowest vulnerable areas with high middle housing opportunity, so they're somewhat walkable. So that's kind of the potentially easiest place to roll out middle housing. Yellow areas are highly vulnerable, but they have not had significant change in the recent past. And the red have both recent high changes in the market, as well as having high vulnerable populations. So they suggest in these locations we really consider anti-displacement strategies to roll out concurrently. Which leads us to Chapter 6, the displacement mitigation strategies. So I'll start by highlighting the yellow box on the right, which shows different types of strategies. The house with the plus is housing production, creating more units. The house with the hands is preserving what we have already. And the house with the people is protecting residents from immediate threats to displacement. So I think there are 14 different mitigation strategies. I'll just highlight one, the second one here on the page, which is a manufactured housing community preservation zone, which is an idea that we have a significant population living in manufactured housing in Asheville, and we could work to protect those populations by creating an overlay zone that would make it more difficult for new development to happen there that isn't manufactured housing. So that could be a way to really insulate those families from the threat of somebody coming in, buying a large parcel and evicting people to do a new subdivision. And so I encourage you all to read through those and help in the conversation. So the recommendations, here the summary, just two sentences that I want to read that I think really stand out in this study. The study found that the existing regulatory context in Asheville encourages single-family housing significantly more than middle housing types. Simply allowing more single-family homes to be built will not move the needle enough to address this housing shortage or increase attainability. To me, this is an important point that we need to really absorb, which is saying even if we have a lot of land, building our way out of this with single-family housing is not the solution. Because of the price point of those units, we really need to change our model and find ways to incentivize and support middle housing as one of our tools. So broadly, the summary calls to engage a community conversation to develop a missing middle housing implementation plan, to allow middle housing more broadly, focusing on most appropriate areas, to consider the concurrent establishment of the anti-displacement strategies, and to align other standards and requirements to better permit middle housing by right. You're not expected to read this. I just wanted to put all the recommendations on one page so you can kind of feel the size of the recommendations, which isn't infinite, but a lot of these include a lot of repercussions that would take a lot of work. And so, take your time to read through these. Each one comes with sort of a little synopsis of why, and you can refer to different parts of the document to understand why it's significant and why we should consider the changes. So our next steps, we're in the middle of a process of providing an overview to different boards and commissions and other groups outside of the city. This is a list of what we have on deck right now. This is sort of a broad brush overview at this point. We're not trying to push necessarily any changes to, make people feel frantic like the changes are coming. I mean, housing is crucial and we need to start making some changes, but at this point, we want to give an overview to the community because it's a new report, and then to go to City Council in early January to get some guidance from our elected leaders. And sort of somewhat related, in January, Council is reviewing a flag lot and cottage text amendment, which is somewhat related to this, and you guys weighed in on those amendments that went to Council, and that's happening in January as well. So I believe that's the end of the presentation. If you have any questions, I'll take them. I'm also here with David Hazard, our senior urban designer, who's heavily involved. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
I have a question. We've done lots of studies the city has over the years, and we usually look at other cities to see what they're doing and learn from them. Has that been looked at in terms of, the typical cities that we've looked at for other things like food trucks, and all the other things we've done over the years?
It wasn't specifically a part of the consultant's work to do like a summary of target cities and the policies that are rolling out. I think part of it is that this is very new to lots of places, and a lot of cities are very different in rolling out policies in different ways, so it could be difficult to do that. We obviously have looked at other places. I think what we have as a strength is that we're conducting a study to have a community conversation about what the possible impacts are, where there is potential to make change before implementing anything. Some cities sort of are just rolling out changes and getting a lot of pushback. So at least this has given us 9 months to conduct the study. Now we have a study, and we can, I think, think through the issues more significantly.
Is it staff's goal to change the UDO when you get through all these conversations with the different groups, or what's kind of the staff's interest in that?
I think staff, as well as everybody, knows that the UDO has a lot of flaws, and yes, we want to make a better city and to allow more housing choice. As you all probably know, in 2/3 of our zoning districts, we ban all housing but one type. So that's a pretty significant.
I live that every day.
You live that every day, yeah, and so do many people, and it's challenging because it severely limits opportunity in Asheville, and so we have a lot of things that we can do to make housing better and more diverse in Asheville.
So piggybacking off of what Commissioner Griner said, this report's going to be just shown to the City Council, but those changes in the UDO would be a later thing. Is there a projected timetable? Or are you willing to, for like when those changes might be coming out? Are we talking months, years?
I know that council feels a lot of pressure to do something, and so I would expect that we're nimble and can act as quickly as council and leadership guides us. So I would think potentially in spring, early spring, we could have a package of significant changes. That may be aggressive. I'm sort of speaking out of line here,
Sure.
but it's doable.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Okay.
I have a question. Can you tell me more about the renter survey, and specifically, like, when was it conducted? Like, what month was it conducted? And then who participated in it? Like, how long have people been renting? And are they new to Asheville? Things like that.
Mm-hmm. I should have reviewed this. I think we conducted it in about April
of this year?
of this year. That's right. And it was we got a good response. I think it was almost 1,000 people. And we have a lot of information about how long they've been residents, and a lot of really interesting responses. A significant number of them have felt like they were displaced already. I don't think I can really pull back much more data, much more information than that.
The only reason I'm asking is because I just listened to a podcast about renting versus ownership, and a lot of it had to do with like the interest rates. So when I just see like the biggest home ownership is affordability, it's unaffordability. I just wondered like exactly when it was conducted, and
It happened before the
and I would
interest
love
rates
to
went
see
up.
I would love to see like the questions that went into that. So
So I have the text from the draft document that says between July 6 and August 11, 2023, 932 people participated in the City of Asheville's renter-focused missing middle housing survey, resulting in a total of 27-ish thousand response data points and 1,600 unique comments. So July 6 to August 11.
and is that in the 129
Yep.
pages
It's
that
on
I could
page-
155.
that I could link? Because I would really
We-
love to see some of their responses.
We definitely have that. I don't think the complete survey is in the report, but we have it, and we'll definitely make sure to include it as an addendum or something.
There was some reference to changing the small lot ordinance as it relates to flag lots, like an alternative to revising the flag lot. Could you speak more to that?
So I'll say that we asked our consultants to look at and weigh in on flag lots and cottages because we had this community-initiated text amendment, and we wanted to make sure that they were being addressed in context with the middle housing study. And so, first of all, that this typically wouldn't be part of their work because, as their report states, that middle housing isn't seeking to increase the housing stock of single-family housing, which primarily the flag lot ordinance and this version of the cottage ordinance arguably is doing. But in that context, they recommend as one of their options to amend flag lots or to consider a small lot ordinance. And we haven't looked into it, but the idea is kind of an option if you're not going to change your flag lots, but you want to allow for small lots behind existing lots, that there's another mechanism for doing that. Other cities are doing it. I think Raleigh has a small lot ordinance. I'm not sure, but that was something that we may want to consider if we're going to go down that route. I think really the report leans heavily on this idea that single-family housing is not the path forward for getting out of the housing crisis or meeting attainability. So we might argue that that isn't the best low-hanging fruit, that we should focus on other things.
Why are there minimum parking standards suggested by this study?
They're suggesting to be more flexible in parking because parking takes up a lot of land. And
But why have it at all?
well, they suggest that you might want to consider removing parking requirements completely, but they also suggest, if not doing that, that there are other things you can do. You can reduce parking requirements. In our UDO, we require one parking space if you have 2-bedroom units and 2 parking spaces if you have 3 bedrooms or more. So they're suggesting if you don't want to completely get rid of off-street parking requirements, you could instead just require 1 parking space per unit, regardless of the number of bedrooms. You could exempt parking for properties within a certain distance of transit. So there are there's sort of a spectrum of options depending on political palatability and what might be feasible.
Any other other comments, questions?
I'll just make a quick comment. I really appreciate the staff and the advisory team's work on this. Is really a lot of work, and I'm excited to see the implementation stage of this. And I know that there's certain aspects of this that we can really dive into detail and see, how could it be better. One particular thing from your presentation was the building height. I think everyone agrees that the way the UDO defines building height could use some cleaning up. I'm a little bit concerned about a two-story limitation, particularly in areas that have topography. Single-family homes are being built three-story in a lot of our neighborhoods in Asheville right now, especially with the postage stamp lots that remain. So limiting to a two-story for a fourplex seems a little bit, limiting, or could be a little bit limiting in the implementation. Really excited to see some improvement and refinement on reduced parking standards. I think that's long overdue, and just, really appreciate all the work that's gone into this.
Thank you.
Along with that, we know you guys are doing great work, council's doing great work to get this done. As a commission, is there any, do you guys see an avenue for us to help be proactive in any way? Whether that's providing recommendations formally from our commission to staff or to council, or I don't know, do you see a path for us to help?
Thanks. I don't think at this point, but certainly when we come back with a framework for implementation, we'll look for your support. And with your housing working group, I suppose we can get into details and spend time thinking about how to refine potential proposals. Yeah. All right, thanks so much.
Thank you. All right. So the first application that we're looking at tonight is a ministerial public hearing, a request for a level 2 site plan review of a new 6-story mixed-use hotel building located at 22 Carter Street. The property is identified as PIN number 9649-10-9027 in the Buncombe County tax record. The property owner is Milan Cian Asheville Hotel LLC. The applicant contact is Tony Hauser. Planner, coordinating review, Clay Mitchell.
Chair Levi, just before you begin, just for new commissioners on the process for a level 2, it's administrative review, as Chair Levi said. That means you're supposed to focus on the technical, whether the technical standards have been met, and when the public makes comment, they are also supposed to just stick with not their opinions about what they like or don't like, but is there a technical reason that it doesn't meet the city's technical requirements, just so you know.
Thanks, Janice.
Thank you. So this slide is the basis for what
Well.
I thought I might share with you. Good evening, Chair, Commissioners. Some of you are new, and I'm sorry, I wanted to share with you what that process is. So the code calls it a ministerial review. The statutes call it an administrative decision, and the courts have interpreted it exactly as you would expect our city attorney to tell you. So I put this in there for you. This was kind of a late-minute addition so that you understand the difference between this and some of the other hearings that we have at this commission. This is a site located just north of Patton Avenue between Ann and Carter Street. It has frontage on both. When we give you these reports, we go through all the zoning compliance. So I added a couple of parentheticals for some of the new members. It's in the Central Business District, called the CBD district because it's the Central Business District, not for other reasons. The overlay zoning, these are zoning districts that overlay our traditional kind of divisionary, districts that are drawn in lines on the land. We have a traditional downtown core, which affects the way the building is designed and other design elements. This site, while still in the CBD, is outside of that downtown core. It's also in the tallest height zone, so the height limitation for this site would technically be 265 feet. It is in the hotel overlay district, which is our recently adopted district that manages hotels, And in this area, all hotels would be permitted. The differentiation is between small and large hotels, and I believe that threshold is 36 rooms is the difference between the two. And then we also divide the city up into resource management districts, and that has an impact on the nature of our landscaping, open space, and tree canopy requirements. And this one is the downtown district, which is the least restrictive because we encourage dense infill development. When we do central business districts, we also like to talk about mapped key pedestrian streets, which again also affects the design. Neither Carter nor Ann are key pedestrian streets. So that's how we orient you in these reports to the different layers of the zoning requirements. In aerial imagery, if this were more modern, that open dirt area would be the Embassy Suites Hotel, which is topped off and is now, I think, working on the internal construction. Recently, you saw an application just north of where this site is called the Carter Tribute Mixed-Use Hotel, and then recently applied for, working its way through the design review process, is the Courtyard Hotel at the top of Ann Street along Haywood Street, right across from that intersection. So there's a lot of activity in lodging and hotel uses in this area. The three that I just recently mentioned are under the new overlay. The DoubleTree that's, or I'm sorry, the Embassy Suites that is being built, it was approved prior to the adoption of the overlay. The site plan has been, we summarize it here. Obviously, the staff report treats it much more significantly. This is a site that's below an acre. It currently has a lot of construction staging on it and is the former site of the Sycamore Temple building. It's a 115 room, or sometimes you will see keys, is I think what the industry calls it. 116 keys or rooms would require this to go through what is called a level 3 review, and that would be a conditional zoning. So 115 is where a lot of these hotels will side on so that they can take advantage of the level 2 process, which is what we're engaged in. And broken down, the total gross square footage of this building is 61,825 feet. That includes primarily the hotel, a rooftop restaurant, and then 2 separate areas of leasable retail space that front on both Carter Street as well as Ann Street, and I'll show you that in a better image later. The parking is required. This is one of the few uses in the Central Business District where we require parking, and all of that parking is going to be provided below grade, and it's up 121 spaces, which meets our requirements, and the applicant has provided the necessary parking for bicycle on both sides, so both Carter Street and Ann Street frontage have public accessible racks at the percentage that we require. The design and operational requirements of both the Central Business District and the Hotel Overlay District have been satisfied. This includes fenestration, the nature of access to the building, separate spaces and access to those separate spaces along the frontage at up to 50%. This site actually exceeds that. The other requirements are street trees, tree canopy protection. Here, both of those are compliant. You see the new street trees going up and down both sides on Carter Street and Ann Street. Ann Street will have the utilities put underground, so they will be large maturing species, which will match what is happening also on Carter Street. The tree canopy protection is being satisfied with plantings. So there are going to be 3 large, 1 medium, and 7 small trees planted onto the site and protected in perpetuity. There was a question earlier about what a fee in lieu would have been, and if the applicant had pursued a fee in lieu option, it would have been above $93,000.
Excuse me.
On both street front, yes. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see that.
You mentioned the 115 versus the 116 keys and the level 2 and the level 3.
3.
Requirements. What's the primary difference that the applicant has to go through at that time if they were to go level 3 versus level 2? What's the benefit?
The benefit of going into level 2? A level 3 would be a conditional zoning, which means that they would come to you for a legislative hearing instead of this administrative or ministerial hearing. And then they would have to go to the city council and get a conditional zoning approval.
Okay. Does the community benefits table play into any part of that difference between the level 2 and level 3? Or
Yes.
is that required at both?
It's only required in the level 2.
Okay. And I just was looking through the information. I didn't see the community benefit. I'm sorry, I'm one of those newbies you were talking about earlier, but I didn't see that community benefits table included in there.
So this is probably one of my primary recommendations for any modifications that we make to the hotel overlay. Because of the way the ordinance is written, that is not required to be disclosed until the final step in the process.
So it's an initial benefit that doesn't have to be recognized until much later? Is that what I'm hearing?
They absolutely have to comply, but the compliance, we don't have the authority to require specification of how they're going to comply with the public benefits until the final stage of the zoning process.
And which is the final stage? This isn't the final stage?
Our current opinion is the final TRC process, which is the review that happens after this one.
But I guess to explain it, they have to have a preliminary, say what they're going to be doing. It has to score a certain score that staff and the technical review committee knows, okay, if it doesn't meet this score, then it could not be passed as a level 2.
So even to be in front of us, there's been that conceptual.
There's a conceptual, you're aware of what they're planning to do.
Yeah, I don't want to speak for them. They're here. If they want to come up and say it, they have told us that they are looking at reparations and affordable housing as the mechanism to meet the
Right.
point
I'm
requirement.
trying to think, if somewhere in our ordinance, we probably have a sample benefits table and it has scoring. And maybe we don't have the one that they've checked off the boxes, but they know they have to score. They have to pick enough of those things to score it at, what, do you know the points? I mean.
Not off the top of my
Okay.
head, I do.
But
sorry.
anyway, in order to be at this level too.
120.
But I agree with you that we need to work on this a little bit, just because I'm sure people are curious. And of course, you can ask the applicant if they know what they're planning to commit to have made that score.
Okay, sorry if I created any.
No,
it's okay.
absolutely. That's what I'm here for. To continue, sidewalks on both sides on Ann and Carter Street are 10 feet or greater in different areas due to the nature of the property. The building kind of is a little bit off. So some of the areas actually are larger than 10 feet. One of the interesting internal design components is what's called a jump lobby. So if you look at that upper site plan, is probably the clearest way to see it. If people are arriving at the hotel in a vehicle or they're entering as a pedestrian, they'll walk in that kind of, you see the separated pedestrian and drive area, and then the lobby is kind of in the middle. And with it's called the jump lobby. There's really nothing there, or not a lot there. They will take an elevator, and then the traditional lobby space that we associate with the hotel is at the top of the building. And this has allowed the applicant to increase the space for that separate retail space, both fronting on Carter and Ann Street. That was something I had not seen before. The rooftop amenities are pretty well laid out. There's meeting space, there's a restaurant terrace that has a view to the west, and a fitness room up at the top floor. I already mentioned the separate leasable spaces, and then obviously compliance with the public benefits table. Here's a color-coded image. This helps a lot. This application spent a lot of time working with the design review committee. It was very, personally, it was educational for me to watch. It was a great exchange. I think they had three full meetings with the design review committee, ending up with a vote to recommend forward with conditions that the applicant has met. Some of the larger points about that process, there's a new recessed focal entry point to the space in the front along Carter Street. more separation of the pedestrian and the vehicle entrance off Carter Street into the hotel. You can see the kind of internal jump lobby there in the center, and then the purple spaces represent the separate leasable retail space or whatever the market supports for the owners of the property. On the and side, a lot of work went into creating that space, creating a kind of an edge in the building so that there could be glazing and fenestration that's functional and real, both on Ann Street, and also that would face down into that kind of landscaped area that's immediately behind Jan Davis's tire. And then to the north of that leasable space, the applicant has worked with design review suggestions to create kind of a separate amenity space for the retail. So that could be something like a courtyard or a landscaped area that kind of accentuates and widens the pedestrian streetscape environment on the Ann Street side. These are the final images submitted by the applicant in response to the design review committee interaction. It was hours and hours of work. The brick veneer, this building looks extremely different than what was originally submitted. And here you can see the nature of the work in the design review committee. I would only be making a fool of myself if I tried to use architecture language, but you know, the language of the building, carrying forward the vertical and the horizontal differentiation between the floors. The materials moved away from EPIS to bricks, and you can see the nature of the courtyard in the upper right-hand corner is the Ann Street area. You can see that additional landscaping and that recessed location that's associated with the retail spacing, as well as all of the additional windows and accessible space on the Carter Street side down in the lower left image. Here's just a larger view. You can see that open area on the top with those steel trusses as an accent and the brick columns to support it. And then the close-up on Ann Street, you see here a photo image placed right where it would be with respect to the A-Hope facility, and then also the Jan Davis tire down there in the lower left. So like I mentioned, this application received initial technical review committee approval back in June, design review committee informally twice in both June and August. The application was shared with the Downtown Commission, who were overall supportive and provided comments for us to feed back to the applicant. And then finally, the design review committee held a formal review in October and approved with the conditions, and those plans have been submitted to you that comply with all of those conditions. Based on that, and based on the nature of this review, we find that all the technical standards have been met, and we recommend approval.
Just a quick comment on design review, again for the newbies, but so for hotels, it's mandatory design review and mandatory compliance. So until they get to a point where the design review committee approves it, it can't move forward. Whereas other design review, I think it's all, is it all projects in downtown, have to have mandatory design review, but it's voluntary compliance, just so you know.
Thank you. Any comments, questions?
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell, for that report. About the parking, since there is retail down there, is some of that parking public parking, or is it a mix? Is there a certain part for the hotel? Like, how does that parking break down?
I don't recall where we ended up on that. You want to help me out with
Or
that
do
one?
I need to save that question for that portion?
Hi, I'm Tony Hauser with WSP. Thank you for the opportunity to bring the development before you this evening. I recognize some of you from my tenure on this commission. It's good to see you all. As with regard to parking, since, if I remember this correctly, since the retail space would not be required to have parking in a non-hotel setting, it's not required to have parking here. So all the parking within the deck is for hotel guests as well as employees.
Is that, and also restaurant on top? Is that part of the hotel, or is that a separate entity?
It's viewed this, if I recall correctly, it's viewed the same way. So it would be, there would not be parking required for that.
Okay.
Couple of items. Thank you so much, Mr. Mitchell, for your presentation. Having been on this commission, again, it's really nice to see the educational aspect that you've presented. And I know from my first days on the commission, there are a lot of things you don't realize or don't know about the UDO, so that's really important. I think it's also important for the public. One of the things that I saw for a long time is that the public gets frustrated by not knowing that process, and so it's really enlightening to see that being presented. Two comments with regard to your question about the public benefits table and the level 2, level 3. This development is looking at option 3 on the affordable housing portion of the public benefits table, which is $6,000 per room, as well as and we have to meet 220 points, so we get 210 through that. So we need 10 more points, but we'll get 20 through community, I forget what it's called, neighborhood improvements. And that's 20 more points, and it's $300 a room. So basically, for about $725,000 into those two funds, it can be approved through level 2 rather than level 3, going before council and so forth. The other item that I noted on the presentation was bicycle parking will be provided within the footprint of the site. We're also providing additional bicycle parking in the right-of-way, but that's not allowed to count toward the required parking, bicycle parking, that is.
1 second. First, thank you for sharing the community benefits table insight.
Sure.
Really appreciate that. And then I think I spaced out there a second. You said you're putting bike parking in the right-of-way or in the E?
So there are bike racks that are proposed on the sidewalks, basically, and then there are also bike racks under the building. So if you were to ride your bike under the building to go to the jump elevator that goes up to the lobby, there would be places there for you to park also, or if you're a guest there.
And then you said the bike lane, which bike racks don't count? I'm sorry.
The ones that are in the public right-of-way do not count toward the required.
Sidewalk or the?
That's correct, yeah,
Okay.
yeah, the sidewalk.
Okay. And then I'm guessing that, and this is kind of adjacent, I'm just wondering, as you turn in there must not be like on-street parking and space like that?
There is no on-street parking on either Ann or Carter Streets.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. All right, thank you. I was just wondering.
Thank you for the question about parking. I wanted to know, I can't remember if Carter or Ann, if they're either one-way streets, but will you be turning like left only in and right only out? Like, what's the plan for turning in and out of the parking garage? Is it going to be two-way each way?
It is two-way. Both Carter and Ann right now are two-way streets with no on-street parking. There's been some discussion as a result of the neighborhood meeting that was held for a different hotel of possibly making Carter and Ann one-way. But that's just being discussed in transportation right now. It's not been proposed officially. The driveway for this particular development is far enough from Patton that turning both ways out would not present a problem. And it didn't meet the threshold for a traffic impact analysis either. So, anything else?
I always usually ask how long will it take to build and where are you going to stage?
This probably, given the size of this building, I would estimate will probably be 18 to 24 months. This particular developer owns property further up the road. There's currently a big parking lot there right now. And so depending on which one he develops first, he'll stage it in the other lot. This particular parcel is being used to stage the Patton Avenue stormwater construction right now. So presumably when that gets through, then it's cleared out so that the hotel could begin construction.
Sorry, I just want to go back to the one-way thing real quick.
Sure.
So if you did want it, would that be under City of Asheville, not DOT, because those are COA streets, right?
That's correct.
So where, coming out of the meeting, the community meeting, where did you fall with that? Is it with COA, or we're just kind of like, is it in limbo, like making those streets one way?
Well, there was no decision made that was something that somebody that attended the meeting suggested, partly because the streets are just so narrow. They're narrow even for 2-lane.
Right, that's, so since this is technical, is that something we can recommend?
No, because the city's transportation department has to look at what streets they're gonna want to make.
Or can we, or like recommend like turning one way into the parking garage each way?
Well, you kind of have to base it on technical reasons. It is going to the technical review committee, which is made up of transportation and engineers, but, I mean, we can have it in the comments. You think it sounds like a good idea.
Well, I mean, my thought is that those streets are very narrow, which he actually just mentioned, that they are narrow, and that you get two cars in there, and they're each trying to turn in. I just think about trying to turn into the Aloft, and that's like my immediate thought, is trying to get in there, so.
Yeah, given the way that things are operating right now, like I said, it's the entrance to the parking area is 2-way. It's probably narrow enough that cars would have to potentially wait for somebody to turn in or turn out. But since there's been no decision made about making those streets 1-way, and since that would potentially be at some time in the future, there's really nothing that can be technically planned at this point for it. So it would be sort of grandfathered, I guess, if you wanted to look at it that way. We have, because of that suggestion, and again, that was on a different development, and because I think transportation is looking at that possibility, we have considered how it might affect this location as well as the other hotel. And our expectation was sort of built into this. I don't know if you noticed, but the service side of the building is on Ann Street, so dumpsters and so forth will be picked up there. And because of the narrow nature of the streets, it's not a 90-degree turn in order to get those dumpsters. It's a 45-degree turn in order to pick those up. So if they go 1-way, we would anticipate that Ann Street would be 1-way to the north and Carter would be 1-way to the south. But again, that may never happen, so at this point.
I have another question, Mr. Hauser. It was about the boulder perennial bed that's like in front and kind of like wraps around the side. Like, was that a recommendation from the design review committee to add in, or like how did that kind of?
For which part? I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Like, there's like the boulder and perennial bed.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to understand like the purpose of that. Was that to, I mean, is it an aesthetic thing simply, or is it? I guess I'm just confused. I'm worried that it's. I'm trying to think how to say this. Is it trying to encourage people not to go in those areas at all, or is it like?
It's really both. It's both aesthetic as well as trying to respond to a user population that exists in that area right now.
Okay.
So, and that was one of the big concerns at the neighborhood meeting for this particular development. We had a good number of the folks that are on the board at Homeward Bound, and they were concerned. They were really concerned about the potential impact to the development by their clientele.
Mm-hmm.
There was concern both ways, but I think that was a lot of their concern.
Okay.
So,
thank you.
mm-hmm.
With regards to the jump lobby, was that a suggestion by the design review, or was that something you guys had already included?
I believe that's a brand.
Cool. I just want to
item.
say I really appreciate you activating both streets with retail. I only live a few blocks from here, and I thought that was like a really cool add to the project.
That was something that DRC was passionate about, and so the developer was definitely willing to do that. So. Anything else?
Should you open it for a public comment?
Yeah, so we'll open it up for public comment at 6:23 p.m. Okay, so no one is present to make public comment. We'll close that at 6:24 p.m. I would like to make a motion unless there's any other issues. Okay. I move to recommend approval of the Level 2 project located at 22 Carter Street as presented based on site plans, elevations, and materials submitted and discussion heard during this review, subject to addressing any outstanding technical and design review conditions. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? No? Okay, motion passes unanimously. All right. Next up, we have a zoning map amendment, a request to amend the conditional zoning ordinance, ordinance number 4702, for property located at 5511 Brevard Road to make changes to the project conditions. The property is identified as PIN number 9627-97-4214 in the Buncombe County Tax Record. The property owner is Bear Creek Holdings, LLC. Planner coordinating review, Will Palmquist.
Good evening, Commissioners. Will Palmquist, Planning and Urban Design. I'll be presenting this conditional zoning amendment petition. This is the location of the request. It's at 511 Brevard Road, also known as 141 and 147 South Bear Creek Road. It's just off of I-40. It's not really part of that cloverleaf exit arrangement, but it appears so, but it's a separate roadway that's accessed off of Brevard Road and also I-40. Oops, doesn't look good. Had some great aerial imagery to share with you. Well, in any case, essentially, give you a little bit of history on this site. So this is an amendment to a previously approved conditional zoning. In 2018, Ordinance 4702 was passed to allow for the construction of a 106-room hotel. That hotel has been built and it's under operation today. As part of that rezoning, a 1-acre area of the site and located to the north of the hotel was kind of carved out and kept separate, so it was reserved for just the general highway business zoning that was already there for future development. So essentially, that kind of played out, and in that discussion, the applicant, per City Council's request, agreed to a condition, and there were a number of conditions trying to address, walkability, pedestrian safety, transit shelter improvements and that sort of thing that were responded to. And as part of that, one of the conditions was that no drive-throughs would be permitted on this second lot. So the applicant is back today, and they actually were back here 2 years ago on October 6, 2021, to request for an amendment to that project condition that prohibited that drive-through facility at any future development at that second outparcel lot. In 2021, it was unanimously denied by the Planning and Zoning Commission. The main concerns expressed by the commission was just there was no really site plan for that outparcel. They were just asking to change the language, and the commission had a lot of concerns about how that would actually look and how it would operate, and there was no plan to kind of show that. So the applicant is here today with a preliminary site plan showing how that would work, and that's what we're reviewing tonight. Here's just that existing zoning map, so you can see the lodging expansion where the hotel is located that was rezoned back in 2018, and then the highway business conditional zone that's allows for any use in the highway business with some specific conditions like that prohibition of drive-throughs. The future land use, as designated in the Living Asheville Comprehensive Plan, is urban corridor, and no change in that is required. So this is the site plan for that outparcel being proposed. You can see the existing hotel to the south of the site with the parking facilities. This is the driveway to the hotel off of South Bear Creek Road. So this retail building would be accessed off of that driveway. It would have essentially a 6,000 square foot commercial building with that drive-through facility, and would include 48 new parking spaces, where 30 are required by code. And then it would also have a new sidewalk connection from the site up to Brevard Road, kind of near where the transit shelter is, and then a crosswalk through that parking area. So this is kind of how the conditions would look. None of the other conditions in the rezoning would change. The condition regarding the prohibition of the drive-through facilities would be removed, and then there'd be a new condition that references this site plan, basically saying that the existing future leases of Lot 2 will be from the existing driveway to the site, and that there'd be a new minimum 5-foot wide sidewalk to connect the property to Brevard Road. This review is before you tonight. There hasn't been any prior review for it. Your recommendation, if you make one this evening, will go on to City Council for their final approval of the conditional zoning amendment. Regarding the project's consistency with Living Asheville Comprehensive Plan, staff finds that it's partially consistent with the future land use map, urban corridor designation. That talks a lot about refocusing development and land use patterns, focusing more on multimodal transit, buildings and parking placement that enhances the pedestrian experience along and connecting to these corridors while providing continuity between urban and town centers to which they link. The project would support a couple goals in the plan, including providing infill development in targeted growth areas and establishing accessible and well-connected commercial nodes. So staff is recommending approval of this proposed conditional zoning amendment with the attached Exhibit E project conditions that would modify the existing conditional zoning. But staff would recommend that the approval would be on a few different conditions that would be that could be added to the approval. One of which is that the crosswalk at the overall site's main entrance off of South Bear Creek Road would be improved to a high visibility crosswalk. The crosswalk there is, I don't believe it's really marked at all, so a high visibility one to connect across the driveway to both sides of the sidewalk would be a major improvement. Also, and the second item here does relate to some of the discussions at the initial conditional zoning that City Council talked about, was having connectivity between these two different sites. So this condition would be that the pedestrian connection be provided in the form of a sidewalk between the existing hotel and the future building on that out parcel. There's currently not a direct pedestrian path. It's just drive aisles currently that would connect. Folks would have to walk between the hotel and that future building. And finally, that the drive aisles and the drive-through queue be reconfigured in a manner that minimizes potential conflicts with pedestrians. The layout, I'm not a traffic engineer, but we believe that it could be done in a way that minimizes those potential interactions when you have folks kind of going between the hotel and that future retail building. So those would be our suggestions. The applicant, I believe, is here this evening, and they can respond a little more to those as they wish, and as you wish to ask them about it. But I'd be glad to answer any questions you might have in the meantime.
Thank you.
Thank you.
May I ask why these were not included in Exhibit E?
So these were, I guess, a little bit after the fact of review. I provided them to the applicant for their consideration. And there was not necessarily agreement at that time. There was an explicit disagreement either, but it wasn't necessarily agreed to and incorporated into the project conditions. If you all want to ask them about it and have that conversation with them, they could agree to them this evening, and then they'd be forwarded on to City Council and incorporated into the project conditions if they so agree to.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So have they agreed to these conditions, or that's still up in the air?
Still up in the air.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Palmquist. One question on the original conditions for the Lot 1 that we're now amending. Condition number 11 regards a speculative easement to Buncombe County for a future greenway. At the end of that, it says, if Buncombe does not desire a greenway easement on the property as confirmed in writing, this condition will not be required. Is there any update on that since the development of the hotel?
There's not. That condition would remain, so it would still apply if Buncombe County was still pursuing that greenway. As far as I understand, it's not built, but the applicant and both staff don't know the disposition of that going forward, but it would still apply, so if that ended up being the case, they would still be able to provide it.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, shall we hear from the applicant? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. If you'd like to clarify anything to the commission, or would you like to present and answer any questions? Okay, great. You can introduce yourself, and then if you want to have the site plan, I can put that up too. There's
Yeah,
those
site plan's
conditions too.
great.
Okay.
All right, thanks,
Thanks.
Will.
Yep.
Hello, my name is Bo Carpenter. I'm an attorney with Allen Stell Kilborn. I work with Derek Allen, who was actually got this approved in 2018. So he's very familiar with this project. Here today on a pretty simple request, about as simple as they come. That's to remove a no drive-through condition on a previously approved conditional zoning ordinance back in 2018. I want to talk a little bit about what happened in 2018 and talk about drive-throughs a little bit, and then we can talk about the conditions and answer any questions you might have as well. As Will explained, this was approved in 2018 by City Council. It was the last hotel approved before the moratorium went into place. So the developer was very eager to get this approved. It came before this commission and was approved by a vote of 6-1 before the drive-through condition went in. The drive-through condition came in between this commission and City Council. It did originate from some discussions within this commission, but it was approved by this commission without the drive-through condition. And as we'll explain, this was an out parcel that was reserved for future development, and now it's looking to be developed. The development that's going to go in there would like to have a drive-through in there. And in researching this, I thought, well, why do they need a drive-through now? Well, it's a very different time today than it was in 2018, pre-pandemic. Drive-throughs have taken off in this country since the pandemic. In fact, did a little bit of research, and there's an article from the New York Times from November 7th, 2023, from this year, less than a month ago, that talked about the rise of drive-throughs in this country. And if I could just quote from that article just a little bit, because it really highlights the change in culture that's happened since this was originally included, and the importance of drive-through for businesses and for the population. It talks about how the pandemic sent people into the comforting isolation of their cars to get tested for COVID, celebrate birthdays, and even to vote. And now it seems they don't want to go out, at least to eat. Drive-through traffic has risen 30% from 2019 to 2022, according to a report from the food service research firm Technomic. Meanwhile, the number of people eating inside fast food restaurants in the first half of 2023 fell by 47% for the same period in 2019. Drive-throughs now account for 2/3 of all fast food purchases. And there's particularly, quote, growing popularity of coffee shop drive-throughs among Generation Z and young millennials. I don't think I'm talking too far out of school to say that this is going to be a Starbucks. It's going to be a coffee shop. So they're looking to have a new Starbucks drive-through next to the hotel right off the highway there, which actually looks similar to the one that's going a few exits down off Fairview Road, which I cross every day. And it's funny that the article even mentions Starbucks. It says Starbucks is designing drive-throughs with smaller footprints because of the reliance on drive-throughs. And so this is a very different time period than when this is originally entered as a condition. And I think the removal of this condition as agreed to 2018 is appropriate given the current climate. With respect to the conditions, I don't know if we've had a lot of discussions about those conditions, and I forget the reasons why that might be the case, but I believe the developer is comfortable with those conditions, and as review them this evening. And I don't think that'll be an issue, but it's not something we've discussed in great detail with staff at the same time. The staff, this is the amended site plan. The original site plan did not have the pedestrian pathway that you see on there. That was added after conversations with the staff, who have been, of course, wonderful to deal with throughout this process. There aren't any other changes to this, but striking the one sentence, the drive-through condition, and then the other section that was added was at the request of the city. So we're asking you to recommend to City Council that you approve this change to the conditional zoning ordinance. I'm here to answer questions. The developer's here to answer questions. And I think there might be some public comment as well in support of this condition, this change.
Might I ask why the drive-through condition was put in?
I think it was concern with pedestrian walkways. I believe in reviewing the transcript from the original, the minutes from the original meeting of the commission, that was what was raised. I believe through further discussions between the developer and the city staff, that was the concern, was pedestrian, having pedestrian thoroughfare through there, which actually never really materialized in actuality. But certainly I believe the original developer did build sidewalks that go along the road there, Brevard Road. And so this would not, just knowing this area personally, I don't think this would dramatically affect pedestrian access at all. In fact, there's going to be an additional access through shown in the site plan from the parking lot to the Woodle, to the bus stop.
One of the most important supplemental conditions, I think, is the connectivity between the hotel and your lot. In this site plan, I'm not seeing that pedestrian connectivity ironed out yet, but I think that's a really important thing to add, knowing that this will be a Starbucks. It will be patronized heavily by the hotel guests, and having a safe passage across the parking lot without having to navigate drive aisles, is very, very important. So I appreciate staff for advocating for that, and certainly that would be important for my ability to approve the site plan.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we would want to see any of those conditions incorporated if they're agreed to, and this is approved tonight, as it goes forward, incorporated into the site plan, and then staff would make sure that those conditions are met via the drawing that gets incorporated into the amendment going forward.
Not only that, it's going to be 6,000 square feet, which is like huge. I mean, it's like a super Starbucks. And it's calls for 48 parking spots. So I mean, just like the traffic alone, it seems that it's going to be pulling in from that. I mean, I definitely think about pedestrian safety coming over there, or even just people getting out of their cars and walking from like the farthest spot to try to get into Starbucks.
Yeah, I don't know all the details of what's planned there. All I know is it's going to be a Starbucks. I don't know if they intend to use all that 6,000 square feet. It seems like a lot of big Starbucks to me too, but I don't know those details. We do know they want to drive through, and we have this condition in place that would prohibit it. And that's again a reflection of the change in where we are as a country now between 2018 and now, and people want drive-throughs. It's just the business reality of it.
I have a couple questions.
I was just going to go back to my other commissioner's comment real quick about the Greenway easement.
Yeah.
Where are we with that? Because that's very important to be able to approve this, because they're getting this land, and what are we getting in return?
Well, I do want to point out that that's an agreement with the county, not the city, and it's as far as I know, the county has never come to the property owner to solidify that easement, the Greenway easement. And so that's a bit of I don't know why. I think they might have decided to put the Greenway elsewhere. So it's kind of an odd condition for the city to require a property owner to enter an agreement with the county when it's the county who needs the easement. So it's kind of an awkward provision, and for whatever reason, the county has not come and sought that. And so I don't have the details of that, but it's not happened. You know, I think it's fair to place that on the county to come to the property owner to ask for that. And I don't believe that's happened from the county for whatever reason. And maybe that's something we can work with staff to find out some reasoning behind that
Yeah.
between now and city council.
We can certainly look into that more. That condition would remain in the conditional zonings. It does specify that if the easement would be coordinated with Buncombe County and recorded before CO, the certificate of occupancy for the hotel. So it begs the question of whether the condition's moot if the CO has been issued for the hotel. So it's a little bit hypothetical, but the condition would remain, so it wouldn't necessarily, this amendment wouldn't be a hindrance to that condition, but we can certainly look into that more.
I know you're not the first applicant that's been in that before, so.
Yeah.
Will there be a canopy at this facility, and how far does it project beyond the footprint shown on the drawings?
A canopy for the building?
Yes.
I don't think we know. Do we know whether there'll be a canopy?
We're planning a canopy on it, yes.
And
Just a small, you know, to protect from some of the rain.
Can we come up to the,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. if you're gonna-
I'll introduce, this
Yeah.
is Jesse Carter, who's here on behalf of the developer, the property owner.
Hey, Jesse Carter with Streams Development. To answer your question, yes, there will be as it's currently designed, there is a canopy that overhangs over the edge of the building, if that's specifically what you were referring to.
Yeah, and how far does it project?
From what I can tell, it looks like it's about 10 feet. I've just kind of got some general elevations right now that are conceptual. And I did also want to mention that this isn't one large single tenant. It's conceptually planned to be a 4-bay shop. So there'll be 4 different individual tenants in it.
Okay, so the other question is about the condition, the supplemental condition about the drive aisles and drive-through queue being reconfigured in a manner that minimizes potential conflicts with pedestrians. So would that be, is staff saying that they see a conflict, or is that just a CYA there?
Yeah, I think staff, including not just myself, but other folks who are more design-oriented on our team, noted that the drive-through arrangement, depending on the exact layout of the future tenants, I don't know exactly what's driving the design specifically, but from our kind of 30,000-foot view from up high, it just seems like it could be done in a way that didn't cause the vehicles to have to travel the entire loop of the parking lot to get into the queue, and that would just minimize the drive time and the potential for conflict with pedestrians. And that's a hard one for the applicant to agree to, I'm sure, because it's, you know, requires them to redesign it, which they obviously can't do at tonight's meeting, but it's something that perhaps they could look into. If there were ways to minimize that conflict, or maybe add more crosswalks, or make the pedestrian environment safer, including that sidewalk connection, if they agreed to that, perhaps the incorporation of that could add new crosswalks too, and that sort of thing. So
I will say we're amenable to the first 2 conditions. The third one is something that we'll just put our best efforts in working with staff on to try and improve that.
I mean, I'm not an architect, but I've been to like 4,000 Starbucks. And so, I mean, I've been to lots of them where the drive-through doesn't run all the way around the parking lot.
Yeah, can you speak into the mic?
Oh, sorry.
It's hard to hear.
I just said that I'm not an architect, but I've been to like 4,000 Starbucks all across the world. And that I've been to a lot where that I don't drive all the way around the parking lot to get my coffee.
So, I have a question for staff, and I guess this is point of order for my clarity. Like, they're asking for approval to remove the drive-through restriction. We're not actually, like, this design is not something we're actually, like, solidifying here, correct? Or am I missing?
The this design would be part of the conditional zoning amendment in the final plans when they get submitted and reviewed, which you wouldn't necessarily see, would have to be substantially conforming to these plans.
Okay.
So they'd be close, squinting your eyes, but it wouldn't have to be this exactly. If that makes sense.
Okay, yeah, I guess, all right.
If they agree to these conditions, they're gonna have to revise that
If they agree to these
plan
conditions,
before
yeah.
it goes to council.
As it
Gotcha.
moves
Is it
forward to
possible to
council.
see those three again?
Sure.
They're also in the folder on the,
They're under the
I was
suggested
done,
motion.
but-
Well, they're under staff recommendation for the staff report. And it sounds like the applicants agreed to use their best efforts to work on that last one. So that would be what, you might want to work on the wording.
So to build on Commissioner Fairclough's question, that this would only come back to planning and zoning if there was some sort of technical modification that needed to be sought for the specific build of the proposal. Otherwise, removing the condition, would likely become a staff level review.
Correct. Yeah, the scale of that proposed project would not require to come through to you all unless they had to get any changes to the zoning after the fact. Correct, yeah. Do you want to open up for public comment before I forget to?
yep. Okay, we'll open for public comment at 6:50 PM.
Hi, my name is Chris Gilbert. I'm the general manager at the hotel, Town Place Suites, which is in the parking lot there. So this proposed project, I think will just tremendously help my hotel. I mean, just to be biased, but it will, and just the whole area itself. Because I mean, really, when you get past the farmers markets, it's a dead area, farmers market and hotel. So, potential projects in the future is going to happen there, and the potential of the Starbucks and all the other stuff coming there. Those potential tremendously help the area to grow, because we've talked a lot about walkability. Now there's potentially, right now there's not really any walkability. Just you go to my hotel, farmers market, that's it. So I mean, it just help, even people coming off 40, it just help tremendously businesses and stuff like that. So I'm for the project.
Thank you.
Anyone